Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, the Faithful Stamper, an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up! Today I have for you a technique that's been around for a while, but I have never tried until today. And I was excited to try it. I thought it would be complicated, and it really isn't. You just need one special piece of material in order to make this project. And it's something you can find from Stampin' Up! Or other places too. So this is the floating strip technique. And what's really great about this card is it's an interesting accent to your card without a lot of trouble and a lot of fancy supplies or fancy folds. So it's called a floating strip card because you put your strips of paper or cardstock on a piece of acetate, a window sheet. And that is how you get the floating effect. If you hold it to the light at just the right part, you can see the shine from the acetate through, but really, at a quick glance, you'll just see the paper strips. And it's a really fun thing to do. And like I said, not complicated at all. So I'm going to show you how to make this. So I'm going to start with a card base. This is 4 1/4 by 11, scored in the middle at 5 1/2. You can use either style of card base. I call this the long or the hot dog card base. But you can use the other one as well. That is 8 1/2 by 5 1/2, scored at 4 1/4, and folded in half. So it's up to you which one you want to use. I'm just going with basic white tonight. And then I'm adding a panel of basic white that is 5 1/4 by 4. And I ran it through my cut and emboss machine and my Tasteful Textile 3D embossing folder. So hopefully you can see the little bit of subtle texture that I got. This is one of my favorite embossing folders, and I'm sad because it's retiring. But I'm using it. I'll definitely keep it in my collection, but I'm using it while I have it available. So I'm just going to layer this on the front and center of my card. Now, if you like, you can mix and match colors. You could add a colorful cardstock layer and then add a smaller layer that's embossed. It's up to you. Be creative. So next up, we're going to work on that floating strip. So I'm going to set this to the side. And I recommend a piece of grid paper or graph paper if you have it, and a silicone mat if you've got one. These are the handiest things. I didn't have one for a long time, and then I saw some demonstrators using it, and I thought, I really need to get myself one of these because it saves my tabletop from all sorts of messes, and it's really handy for a project like this one. So the other reason I like it is because you can see through it, and so I can put it down here on my work surface, on my grid paper, and still see my grid lines. So it's just a handy tool to have. So I have my piece of window sheet, which is a little hard to show you on camera, but this is 4 1/2 inches tall by 3 inches wide, and I'm just going to lay it right on top of my mat along with those grid lines, just to give myself a guide. Then I have some strips of colored cardstock, and I have 8 strips, 2 each of 4 different colors. So these are 1/2 inch wide, or 1/2 inch tall by 4 inches wide. I like a little overhang to play with. So I have 2 in gorgeous, nope, that's Highland Heather. Highland Heather. Okay, gotta slow down, I'm getting tongue-tied. Highland Heather, Gorgeous Grape, and then 2 each of our retiring colors, Just Jade, which is one of my favorites. I love how that coordinates with the purple, and Magenta Madness. So what I'm going to do with this is just take a tape runner. I recommend a tape runner or glue dots. You don't really want glue because it's not going to adhere well to the shiny, slick surface of the acetate. So when you would press your strips down, the glue would spread out, you'd have a big mess. And if it didn't, you'd probably have to let it sit for quite a while to dry enough that your pieces wouldn't shift. So I would leave the liquid glue for another time and use either a tape runner or some glue dots. So what I'm going to do is just take one of my strips of paper here and put adhesive on the back. I also like these 1/2 inch strips because they are a good width for my tape runner without having it hang over the edges. If you have a little overhang, you might just want to kind of smooth it with your fingers so you don't have extra glue hanging out anywhere. And I'm just going to line this top strip up with the very top of my acetate. So I'm going to have it hang over on both sides, but hug the top. And so I'm just going to continue to put glue, or adhesive, not really glue, but on the backs of these strips. Now I will say, while I do have my grid paper here to help me keep things straight, I'm not lining it up with every single block. I'm going to show you an example where I did that, and it really looks fine, but I like it a little closer together. So it is up to you how close together you put your strips of either paper or cardstock. So I'm basically just eyeballing this and putting them at what I hope to be an equidistance. And so once I get all 4 colors on there, I'm just going to repeat the colors. So you can use as many color combinations if you want. You could do a whole rainbow of colors. You could just do 2 or 3 or 5. Totally up to you. The most important thing is that you keep the pieces straight and try to keep the distance the same. Although I suppose you could experiment if you wanted. I did not think that far outside the box. That one looks a little crooked to me, but we're rolling with it anyway. All right, almost there. Oh, I got a little adhesive hanging off. Pardon me. So I'm going to just tuck that behind. And it might be a little crooked, but not as bad as I thought. Now, when I get to the last strip, depending on how I've spaced it, I usually have the strip a little bit wider than leaving a space and the acetate that's left, and that's just fine. I could cut it off if I wanted to, or I could make the acetate a little bit longer, but for this style, it really doesn't matter. You basically want to just start and stop your piece of acetate with either cardstock or designer series paper. You don't want to have excess amounts of the acetate hanging out off the top or the bottom. That would look a little strange. Now, here's why I like my silicone mat, because with the extra glue that I put on there, this is definitely sticking. So it would be stuck to my work table or my paper, and then I'd have ripped paper mess. So having the silicone craft mat, I can just move that to the side now and get it ready for another project. So next what I have to do is just take my paper snips, and I'm just going to trim the excess off right down the side. And since this is a straight edge, it's fairly easy, but you can do it with other shapes too, like circles. I didn't stray too far from rectangles or circles, but you definitely can check that out. And so I'm just going to trim these edges off. The hardest part is trying to cut when you got all this paper stuck to your scissors. So you might just have to take a minute and clear your scissors off before you continue. And that is okay. All right, so there we go. Pardon me. So I've got my little floating panel here. And like I said, if I wanted to, I could cut the extra cardstock off the bottom, but nobody's gonna know it's there but me, so it's okay. So bring your card base back over, take your panel so your cardstock's on the top, flip it over so you've got that whole shiny acetate side facing up. And you want to put dimensionals on the back. Either you can use our foam strips if you have them. If you are using strips that are about 1/2 inch like I am here, you can use the larger dimensionals. If not, you'll want to go with the smaller ones. I will show you an example, but I tried one with thinner strips and I had a lot of trouble getting my glue not to show on the acetate because my glue was wider than the paper. So that was a little tricky. And I just like to space these out so my panel doesn't sag anywhere on the front of the card. But the most important thing is to keep the dimensionals centered behind the strips so that they're not showing through the acetate. I'm going to peel the backing off these, and once that is done, this can go on my card front. So I can do it in the center, I can put it to one side or the other. This one I'm going to stick to the center, just like so. Now decorating is the next step, and you can go as fancy or as simple as you want. I could just take this sentiment, pop it on the front, and voila, that would be fine, but I'm going to add a little accent. This is a sentiment from the Best Year stamp set that is retiring, but I love this little happy birthday to you, and I just fussy cut it. I went ahead and pre-stamped it in fussy cut so you didn't have to watch that. And I'm just going to add some mini dimensionals since this is a smaller sentiment. Like that. And then once the backing is peeled off, I can put this anywhere on the card. And it's up to you if you have the silhouette pieces like these butterflies I'm going to talk about. You could put them on first and then add your sentiment, or add your sentiment first and then add your extra pieces. It is up to you and whatever design you choose. So, let's see, I'm going to put my sentiment here. And then I have these little butterflies that I die cut. These are from the Butterfly Brilliance stamp set. And I'm going to use those on the card. What I should have done is put them on adhesive sheets and then basically created stickers when I ran it through the die cut, but I wasn't thinking about that this morning. So I'm going to go with glue dots because this is a little fussy to try to get glue on all these little pieces. And I have glue dots that are from my paper pumpkin kits. I have lots of these left over because they always give you more than you need. And so I always keep them. And these are very handy for projects like this. If you don't know what paper pumpkin is, hop on over to my website and check that out. If you don't have a demonstrator that you are working with currently and you'd like to see a copy of the current catalogs, please feel free to reach out to me and I would be happy to send you one. I'm not going to cover every inch of these with glue dots, but I'm just going to add a few here and there to make sure I have enough to let these stick to my card. And I like these. I used to use my fingers to put these on projects, and then I was finding they were sticking to my fingernails. And I'd get annoyed because my projects weren't sticking, and then I'd end up with a big pile of glue dots on my fingers. So I found my Take Your Pick tool is really handy for things like this. So I put my glue dots on. And this is probably the most tedious part, is trying to pull these off. Or at least you're probably thinking it's tedious watching me do this. But again, my Take Your Pick tool and this little pointer here make it a lot simpler than trying to use my fingernails. Alright, so there's one. And I'm going to put this little butterfly down there at the bottom. And then this other one here will go at the top once I get my little dots here off the back. Like I said, this is the worst part, especially when you're on camera and you want them to go smoothly. Alright, there we go. So this one is going to go up here at the top, just like that. And look how pretty that is. Simple, simple. So to finish off this card, I'm just going to put a sentiment on the inside. I have a coordinating stamp, pardon me, got a little tickle, that goes with my birthday sentiment. And I picked a gorgeous grape to go with my colors. I like the darker color ink. And just like that, I have my finished card ready to go. So there is your floating strip technique. So like I said, not as complicated as you might think, and great for any occasion, and doesn't require a lot of supplies. So here is the design we just made with those strips fairly close together. And then here is the design I tried first, where I used each of those blocks on the grid paper to make my design. And you can see they're just wider set apart. It really looks fine. I just prefer them a little bit closer together. So it's really up to you and how you want to put your card together. But obviously this is a masculine card, so you can use it for girls or guys, any occasion. This one's actually going out in the mail tomorrow. And I used one of the die cuts from our Majestic Mountain stamp and die set. And then I went ahead with that same fussy cut sentiment. And I don't know if you can tell, but I've got evergreen trees embossed here on this panel. And on this one, I used the extra layer of cardstock just to change up the card look a little bit. Next up, you are not limited to those rectangles. You can use circles or other shapes as well. So I just took a layering circle, and you can do the circles one of two ways. You can either cut your circle out ahead of time and then lay the strips on just like I did with the rectangle on the first card, and then trim the excess. Or you could take a square that's a little bit bigger than your circle, lay your strips out, and then put the circle die on top and run through the machine. That can be a little fussy. I found that when I used my die cut, I had to help it in a couple spots with scissors, just because the thickness of the acetate along with the designer series paper, it didn't want to cut completely through even if I tried to put an extra piece of paper in to use as a shim. So it's up to you. I prefer to use it the way I showed you first, which is to cut my shape and lay the strips on top, but you can do it whichever way you like. And then to go with my circle, which I did with designer series paper, I added my little banner here at the bottom. And I could have just left it like that. I also have my painted texture embossed panel there. But I didn't quite like the look of the card with the plain circle. I wanted it to have a little something. So rather than dig out my die cuts, I popped out my tulip punch and punched it with a coordinating color here. And I really thought the card came together when I used that. Added a little dimension behind one of the tulip leaves or petals, and a little bit of bling just for an accent. And then I have a sweet little Mother's Day card ready to go. Something different. Now here is the sample I made with the thinner strips, and it really worked the same way. It was just a little bit fussier working with that glue, trying to make sure it didn't show through on the card. You don't want any goopy spots, but it really worked out well. I used multiple pieces of designer series paper to get the different look there, whereas on this card I just cut strips in a row and then glued them on the front. And then I added a silhouette here and a message. So I did stamp this before I ran it through my cut and emboss machine in the embossing folder. That's a neat trick you can do sometimes. It really gives your card a different look. And then this last one is probably my favorite. It's just nice and bright and cheery. This one I used, again, different strips of designer series paper. Instead of sticking with the white, I used the color. And I thought about doing this card vertically, and at the last second I decided to do it horizontally as well. So you can use either orientation with your card. And I used this die set for the first time. This is our Amazing Thanks die set, and it has several different words: the thanks, amazing, you, and I think there's a couple other things in there. But I really love this. I love the different, just the layers you get. So I'm definitely going to be using this a lot. And this one I just kept simple on the inside with a strip of designer series paper and plenty of room to write my message. So that is your floating strip technique. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make that. If you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. I typically post videos here twice a week. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button, and then you can click the notification bell if you would like to be notified every time I post a video here. You can also follow me over on Facebook if you're interested at The Faithful Stamper. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and happy crafting.